And good morning, and hello to everybody out there. It is the 14th of September, a Sunday, and the end of a extremely consequential week here in America and beyond. And per usual, we're going to talk about the suppress Herald and its unrelenting propaganda and how it is handling a major issue or major event here in the States, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And it is extremely telling to go through and look at this rag of a propaganda sheet run by a bunch of left-wing lunatics pretending to be journalists, and they can't help themselves. I don't know if these are just absolutely despicable individuals or if they're just totally wrapped up in their propaganda machine and they can't help themselves. But let's take a look at just what's happened and how this boils all the way down to our local news, reinforcing national news and what's happening on the main basically media and how that's being dealt with. The murder, assassination of Charlie Kirk. Let's start with this. Charlie Kirk, and anybody that does any kind of time spent looking at videos, looking at what's coming out about Charlie Kirk, was a really great individual. He was you know, basically what he was for was basically faith, family, country. I'll repeat that. Faith, family, country. What's wrong with advocating for all of those things? That's basically his focus. And he was murdered, assassinated for that. Although, in the mind of that wackadoodle assassin, we will find out, and I'm sure we'll find out more, he was a Nazi, he was a hateful individual, and he was had to be killed because he was so powerful in spreading his hate and, all of that. And this is the problem we have, and this is very simple. The mainstream media is going to try and run away from their complicity in the murder, assassination of a really great individual, a father, a husband, and a really decent human being. And they are trying to run away from it now. And yet, here we have just days after this, it actually hasn't changed. They are stuck in their ways. And this is perfectly demonstrated in the Suppress Herald. And the Suppress Herald is much like mainstream media across the spectrum. We'll break it down a little bit just with going through the papers. And this is the paper right after, the Suppress Herald right after he was murdered. And the title, the overall title is I looked up to him a lot. Young conservatives in Maine mourn Charlie Kirk's death. This kills them that they're actually supporters and people who looked up to a conservative. But here's how the title, subtitle, The Right-Wing Activist and Influencer. Right wing. No, he was conservative. Simple as that. Not, they like to paint you as a right wing because you don't support their crazy agendas. He visited Maine last month, and his ardent followers included college students and many other young people here. I won't get into all the details, but here's the one that really sums up exactly why a deranged individual climbed onto a roof with a rifle and assassinated Charlie Kirk. And this is not going to end because they are weaponizing disturbed individuals with their rhetoric. They're in denial, but I can just go through and here's this days after he was murdered. Kirk had amassed a following among conservative Christians, especially among the younger generation through social media and his Prove Me Wrong debates, and was an ally of President Donald Trump. Now, there is where we get going. He was also a provocative figure who frequently drew liberal criticism for his, and this is the line, controversial views on issues like immigration, gun control, and gender identity. Controversial views. Says who? Says you, liberal whack jobs that run the Suppress Herald, that's a failing, call it, newspaper that will ultimately fail, will ultimately go bankrupt and close because you are not in any way running a newspaper. You're running a propaganda sheet and everybody knows it. I'm reaching out to people to figure out what they've been up to because it's very subtle. But here it is, criticism for his controversial views on issues like immigration, gun control, and gender identity. Controversial says who? Mainstream are his views on immigration. The vast majority of Americans support what Trump is doing with basically following the law and enforcing immigration law and deporting dangerous illegal immigrant criminals from our country. Right here in Maine, we've had two women individually in two separate incidents run over by illegal immigrants driving cars and killed just in the last month. And yet, this rag of a paper called the Suppress Herald says those are controversial issues on immigration. Gun control. The Second Amendment has a vast majority of Americans supporting it. And as far as gender identity goes, even here in Maine, 80+%, and I'd say it's probably closer to 90, but all the polls show massive 80+% support for banning boys and men from competing in girls and women's sports and being in women's locker rooms and beyond. In other words, his views were not controversial. They were just opposed to the left-wing radicals in this country, the very vocal minority who happen to control the schools up until recently when Charlie Kirk was making massive inroads in universities and schools and getting the truth out and getting kids to engage and kind of learn that, hey, maybe what I've been told and shoveled for these years isn't really the whole truth. And that's why they disparaged Charlie Kirk to the point where one deranged lunatic got on a roof with a rifle and killed him. And now they run away from it and say, we didn't do that. We don't know how that happened. Right. Let me tell you, these people are despicable. And the reason that you can break this down is they just are deranged. They have Trump derangement syndrome, and Charlie Kirk was a supporter, and they are number one political activists. They are not a media and not a journalistic operation at the Suppress Herald. And here we are, Sunday, September 14th, just a matter of days after Charlie Kirk was gunned down, assassinated. And here's our view, okay? And this is so telling. We'll be pretty short today because it's so obvious. Our view, and this is the editorial board at the Suppress Herald. High tension in politics demands high care. The assassination of Charlie Kirk is a chilling and painful reminder of the task now at hand. And this is from the editorial board. Meeting last Wednesday afternoon, members of this editorial board sat back to assess the increasingly lively field of Democratic candidates in the 2026 main race for the U.S. Senate. Blah, blah, blah. Our conversation, however, turned to the tone and tenor of the admittedly early days campaigning. People were angry than usual, we observed, fired up. Together, we lamented the tendency of political challengers to focus on attacking the incumbent. We were roundly critical of negative framing as a means of getting back or getting ahead, noting how much easier it is generally to condemn rather than to propose, easier to criticize and villainize rather than make a robust case for one's own ideas and argue one's own merits. We said we'd like detailed proposals and new ideas instead. A few hours later, an email from Mills, that's Governor Janet Mills, would land in each of our inboxes ordering state and national flags lowered to half staff in response to the horrifying assassination on a college campus in Utah of 31-year-old conservative activist and pundit Charlie Kirk. So they're saying, we have to tone down the rhetoric. On the very same page of that editorial saying we need to tone down the rhetoric is an editorial by Richard Sterling Surrey, as a retired lawyer. He's a former general counsel of the U.S. National Security Agency from 1990 to 92. I'd say he's a deep state lawyer and currently divides his time between Long Island, Maine, Washington, D.C., and England. And here is the title. When will we speak out against Trump's ethnic cleansing? You mean Trump enforcing immigration laws? Trump imagines that immigrants are destroying America. Yeah, look around, you moron. Most Americans also feel that illegal, and let's keep it the facts, illegal, unrestricted, open borders immigration is indeed destroying our fabric of our country, destroying our streets, destroying our budgets, destroying our towns, and killing, murdering, raping people. And I love this, generalization that, he has a line in here that in actuality, statistically, immigrants are less likely to commit crimes than, naturalized citizens. Let me give you a little bit of a hint, dude. One illegal immigrant murdering, raping, or harming one American is too many. I don't care about your statistics about what percentage. We should not have any, not one illegal immigrant in this country. And to say that it's all minor is just absolutely a lie. Anybody paying attention, it's weekly, if not daily, that we have a story about another illegal immigrant who has taken out, destroyed people's lives, murdered, killed, raped, robbed Americans. We're just coming off the story of this horrific case, and this was not an illegal immigrant, okay, but a horrific case of crime in North Carolina and Charlotte, where a deranged individual murdered a young woman from Ukraine. Not related, but that got a lot of headlines. Whereas the point I'm making here is, whereas women being run over and killed here in Maine, the suppressed Herald, one small story about the woman because she was a partner in a brewery and was well known. They had to write something, and then it's gone. The other story, the other woman who was run over by an illegal immigrant didn't even make the papers. The suppressed Herald chose not to even report it. So this whole idea that statistically there are, they kill and murder fewer people. We shouldn't have a single American raped or murdered by an illegal immigrant. They're here illegally. They aren't supposed to be here. Every bit of crime that illegal immigrants add to the statistics is one crime that should not happen. And that's what people are saying. So go back to Charlie Kirk. We've got to tone down the rhetoric. And here we have on the very same page, in the same day's paper, at the Suppress Herald, you have the editorial board saying we need to tone down the rhetoric. And then they publish extreme, nasty rhetoric, taking down ICE. And here's a line in this published by the same editorial board that are trying to say, tone it down. Here's a paragraph or two. As Hitler did with German Jews, Trump is trying to drive immigrants from America. No, he's not. He's trying to drive illegal immigrants and criminals from America. He is using ICE, his secret police. They're not secret police. ICE has been in existence for decades. All he's doing is enforcing the law. As an instrument of terror, he seeks to make life here so frightening that immigrants flee our country. Not immigrants, illegal immigrants. He's not using the right terminology. Trump is attempting ethnic cleansing, a crime against humanity under international law. That's what they chose to publish on the same page as them saying we need to turn down the rhetoric. And then in the letters, here you go again. Furious with Trump administration's ICE. Basically, same thing. I don't know about others, but to me this sounds a lot like what Hitler did to the Jews in Nazi Germany. Another one in this very same paper, a page later, from the editorial, from the nut job, absolute lunatic editorial board at the Suppress Herald, but they're okay with publishing these shameful rhetoric letters to the editor that are basically saying Trump's a Nazi, he's Hitler, and ICE are his jackboot terrorists. This is insanely insane. This is crazy, but this is who they are. They are not trying to tone it down. They're trying to play the game to not take blame. They don't want to be blamed for the rhetoric that fired up some wackadoodle to go out and take a gun and kill, assassinate Charlie Kirk. They are complicit, just like all of the others that are out of control with this absolute rhetoric, painting Trump and all of his supporters as Nazis and all the rest. This has been going on, and it was only a matter of time before somebody's going to take things into their own hands, and it's despicable, and they're in denial. Let's go to one other thing here that you've got in the very same Sunday paper today, and this is what they're doing, and I'm seeing this across mainstream media and right here in the local propaganda sheet doing the same thing. This is an article. Candidates in Minneapolis campaign amid fear after political assassinations. This is moral relativism at work. I've seen them coming out with, well, look at how we reacted after Gabby Giffords was shot in the head. That was not a Republican shooting a Democrat. They couldn't really bring that up, but they will anyway. This is about candidates in Minneapolis are in fear after political assassinations. A tampon Tim recommended guy who was on, I don't know, commission or committee, whatever, in his own administration, a Democrat, went out and killed two people. One was a state representative or senator and her husband, and then tried to kill two others. And this is called moral relativism. They're going to talk about all the Democrats that have been targeted. And so, it's happening on both sides. Charlie Kirk was a Christian, God, family, country, extremely friendly, happy-go-lucky, basically promoter of dialogue. That's what's coming out. Charlie Kirk brought the people that disagreed with him to the front of the line at all of his rallies on campuses across the country. He wanted to hear them. He wanted to debate them. He wanted to hear what their side was, and he wanted to share his side and have a debate. The very thing that this Suppress Herald editorial board promoted in their editorial in today's paper is what Charlie Kirk stood for. And yet, here's the moral relativism happening. Oh, but there's others, they've killed Democrats. No, they haven't. Not the case. Republicans have not weaponized unstable people to go and get a gun and shoot Democrats. Democrats shoot Republicans. It was basically somebody who worked on the campaign of Bernie Sanders, who shot up the congressional baseball practice field and shot multiple people. I could go on. There's case after case of deranged liberals going after Republicans. And now Charlie Kirk, a truly good man who was doing really good things by promoting dialogue, by promoting a two-way conversation, by opening people up to critical thinking and all the good things that can happen with politics. But because he was effective, they pointed this deranged individual at him. And we'll find out just how much, how actively they encouraged, pointed, helped. We don't know yet all the details of how this guy became radicalized and came to pick up a gun, take a rifle to that roof, and assassinate Charlie Kirk. More will come out. But the bottom line is the rhetoric out of the mainstream media, on social media, and even down to our local level here at the Suppress Herald in Maine is pointed at conservatives, Republicans, especially Trump and any of his supporters, to try and take them out. And this is because they do not win when you have dialogue, when you have a informed discussion, and they can't defend their positions on transgenderism, on illegal immigration, on guns. They can't defend their positions. They're losing in a big way in their positions. And so what do? Point a deranged individual at one of the most prolific campaigners, call it, to discussions, to open dialogue, and to informing, especially young people, very effectively across the United States and beyond. This is what the Suppress Herald does. It supports the mainstream media, and taken as a whole, we are talking about a propaganda machine. Social media, Google, all of us, Facebook and beyond, all pointed in one direction, right down to the suppressed Herald here in Maine, which, again, I'll remind everybody, is a group of newspapers, most of the papers in Maine, controlled by the National Distrust for Local News, which is owned by and funded by George Soros and Bill Gates and Claude Omidyar, which are three billionaires and others that are trying to control the narrative, control the media. That's called propaganda. That's the definition of propaganda. And it's so blatant to look at today's paper and look at here's this editorial, and in the very same people, the same people that wrote that editorial, trying to say we need to all get along, allowed and published vitriolic lies and propaganda with their letters to the editor and editorial page. It's all right there, plain and simple. And with that, that's all we've got for today. And I hope you'll share this. I hope you'll share this with friends, family, spread the word, and learn about how propaganda is influencing us in just more and more ways. And it's really sickening. And it was a really sickening week to see just a wonderful individual, 31 years old, his whole life ahead of him, two young children, 1 and 3-year-old children, and a beautiful wife who now do not have a husband or a father, all because propaganda is taking our country and ruining our country. We need to stand up and say no more. That's it for today. Time out for